In any relationship, communication and understanding yourselves and each other is so important. But particularly in midlife, when it comes to heterosexual relationships and sex within that relationship, it is absolutely crucial. Rightly so, there's so much more awareness now of menopause and how that affects women. But I find it of great benefit for women to understand more about how their midlife man is also changing. From around age 40, almost half of men will start to experience a degree of erectile dissatisfaction. I'm not calling it dysfunction because these are changes which are natural and to be expected. So they might find that they take longer to become aroused, that when they do, they're not as hard and that their erection isn't as reliable as it used to be. As they get older, the proportion of men experiencing this increases. Typically, men don't talk to their female partners about this, and many women aren't aware how common these changes are. At the same time, around that age, he's typically moving from what we call spontaneous desire, where sex just pops into his head multiple times a day, to responsive desire, where he needs to be in a sexually appealing scenario before he starts to feel aroused. Where there's not understanding of this, again, he can be embarrassed and fearful, thinking his libido's disappeared and that he's not a sexual man anymore. When we combine those two things, erectile dissatisfaction and erectile changes, along with this move to responsive desire, a man can be so embarrassed and ashamed that he stops initiating sex. Maybe he turns down his partner if she initiates, and he avoids all sexual situations. A partner might assume that it's about her, particularly if her body's changing in midlife. He doesn't fancy me anymore, this is all my fault. And we can see how easy it is for a sexless relationship to develop if the partners don't talk about this. This is such a shame because if they could talk openly, if these factors were understood, they could still be having good, regular, playful sex. Obviously, this is a conversation to be approached delicately. When you're in bed together, maybe if you've tried to have sexual play that hasn't worked out, that's not the time to talk. You want a time when you know you have a private space, ideally when you're both relaxed. And as with everything sexual, do seek consent, check in. Is now a good time for us to talk about sex? I recommend making this conversation about your shared sex life and for you to acknowledge first, we're both getting older, we're both changing. From that point on, it's useful to be referring to an outside source of information so it's not such an excruciatingly personal conversation. I love recommending that people listen to podcasts about sex. If you put sex into a reputable podcast provider, you'll get educational podcasts. One of the reasons that this is so fantastic is it normalises people talking about sex. You're hearing about it. You're hearing certain words, maybe which you didn't even know the pronunciation of. You're hearing them out loud, and it's teaching your brain that it's okay to talk about these things. Of course, you're also learning about sex, about desire, about anatomy. And then a podcast also gives you a topic to go to your partner with to say, hey, I happened to listen to this podcast. I found it fascinating. Maybe you listen to it together, maybe when you're doing something else, cleaning the house or driving, or maybe they go away and listen to it on their own, and then you can talk about it together afterwards. I love the work of Dr. Peggy Kleinplatz. She did the biggest survey into couples who had been together for over 25 years who reported that they were having better sex than ever. What these couples shared was that it was challenges to conventional sex, often which came up around midlife, which forced them to communicate better, to be honest, to seek new ways of having sexual pleasure, to get out of the mindset that sex must involve an erect penis. They said it was these challenges, communication, and an attitude of curiosity going forward that actually led to them having their best ever sex. We know that for women, conventional intercourse is not the most satisfying form of sexual play. What we find for men also is as they begin to explore beyond that, they also report more sexual satisfaction. So rather than erectile changes, arousal changes, meaning the end of your sexual life together, for both of you, it could actually mean that your best sexual years are coming up.